Well, hello, and thank you for joining me. I'm delighted to have with me for InFlight's contribution to the 6 Feet Apart video series, Fabio Gamba. He's Managing Director of the Belgium-based Airline Catering Association, the ACA, which represents and promotes the interests of the airline catering industry. Hi, Fabio, and welcome.
Well, hi, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, we're halfway through June at the moment. We've already begun to see a limited resumption of flights around the world. Numerous airlines have begun releasing details of their respective onboard safety and hygiene measures under various banners as part of reassurance to passengers about the safety of flying. Now, for its part, the ACA has recently adopted new safety guidelines around in-flight catering. Now, the catering industry is already a highly regulated industry in terms of health and safety. So what is the purpose of these guidelines?
Well, that's a good question because we've always claimed, and I think rightly so, that we're extremely safe because, especially as you mentioned, we're already heavily regulated. So what was the trigger behind this? I think it was related for let's say, to a certain extent, to the guidelines that the EASA has released back a month and a half ago with respect to what airlines would be recommended to do. And there was this passage that we found quite difficult to understand related to food on board and the recommendation of airlines not to or to avoid serving food on board. And so that prompted some reflections amongst our members to say, why is that so? And how can we prove to the outside world that everything that is going out of the kitchen, out of our kitchens, is absolutely safe for the passenger? And so we decided to come up with these additional hygiene measures that we would propose to the industry.
Okay, and I've seen the guidelines themselves. They're quite a comprehensive list there as well. And I see one of the key points I've seen within them is that the pandemic itself is at different stages in different parts of the world. Regulations relative to preventing the spread of COVID-19 vary internationally as well. And these guidelines have been developed to reflect those differences, both at the moment, but also going forward as the situation changes. I mean, how difficult has that been to introduce like a fluidity into these guidelines as well?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. And I guess that was one of the major challenges that we were faced with, to be honest. What we've tried to do is to build guidelines with a variable geometry that would be suited to different levels of risks and at different periods of time at different let's say in different countries. In order to do that, you need to apply a template. First of all, the template would be based on a number of different levels of risks identified. And then you would also need to add a number of what we call the 4 Ps, which stands for the people, the premises, the procurement, and the policies in place. Yeah, right. And make sure that depending on them and that depending on the level of safety that is being identified in this station or country or region, then you can adapt your policy in function. And so what we've come up with is something that you can read from different angles. And we're coming up with a checklist that people can try and apply in function of their risks assessment of their situation and adapt their policy in function.
Okay, so it kind of allows individual airlines and caterers as well to respond to their own individual circumstances and those of the country they're in as well. So it's not overly prescriptive because it allows freedom within certain restrictions.
Indeed,
yeah.
That's the case, and I would say not only this, but also then it is supposed to complement whatever is being done and said at the local level.
Yeah.
So it will never supersede,
no,
obviously, regional legislation. It will usefully complement that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, state aid has already been given to some airlines, and I know that the ACA and other organisations have been very vocal in campaigning for support for the entire aviation industry, so all the way through the supply chain themselves. Are you able to comment upon what kind of progress has been made on this? And as I said earlier, we are seeing airlines begin to reintroduce services. So what kind of further measures, if any, are needed to ensure that airline caterers are able to resume services and respond to a post-COVID future as well?
I think we are here because there is confidence from the passenger. And one of the things that after the travel bans will be lifted will all depend, the whole ecosystem of transport will depend on how passenger confidence has been restored or not. In my opinion, the essential way for that confidence to be restored will be for the passenger to feel that he is in a safe environment. And if he is being allowed to eat and drink at his will, I think that will prove to him that things are back to normal. On the other hand, if airlines say, well, for your own safety, we don't want you to move or to say anything or to lift off your mask for any purpose.
Yeah.
I don't think this is an environment conducive to not only restore passenger confidence, but also it will be extremely cumbersome. And so passengers will refrain from taking the plane.
Okay, now we've touched upon there about, how the industry is changing at the moment. Now, we've seen some airlines have gone as far as reducing their onboard food and breakfast services. Some legacy airlines, in fact, have encouraged passengers to maybe bring their own food on board as well. We've recently heard of 2 airlines that have decided to remove alcohol from their flights, and albeit these may be temporary measures given what's happening in the wider world. But in terms of in-flight catering, do you think that this pandemic has ushered in a new form of food and breakfast service for airlines? I'm thinking maybe an acceleration of pre-ordering, or maybe more app-based menus, that kind of stuff, where they can use technology to reduce those touch points, continue to reduce waste on board, and weight and all these kind of things as well, that I know the airlines and associations like yourself are very keen to promote before COVID happened. And what kind of impact is all this having on new menus and innovation in that area? Because obviously, with a limited number of flights, social distancing measures and so forth, presentation days between airlines and their in-flight caterers have been kind of like a no-go area. So how are we going to see how things going to change once things start to resume again?
We can see that definitely there are trends that are changing at this stage. As you said, there are a number of airlines who said no more food on board, or in a different way. Retail has probably, at least on the short haul, gained some position, if you will. Whether that is temporary or not will remain to be seen. But one thing is for sure is that food will continue to be a major brand differentiator for companies, right? And so I am relatively confident that in a more or less close future, things will go back to where they used to be, with perhaps more emphasis on food, because if you think about this, passenger experience is what really will make a difference for the journey to the passenger. All the rest is pretty much the same. The aircraft type is the same, right? The distance flown will be the same with this or that airline. The airports are the airports. What really makes a difference in the journey are the little thing that you can find on board, and food is a major thing. Is a major element of that.
Okay, I think that's a very positive note to end on. So, Fabio, many thanks indeed for your time, and I wish you and your team to stay safe, stay indoors, wash your hands, and all that kind of thing. And I hope to see you soon in the future once things come back to normal. Thanks again for your time.
Well, thank you for yours. Thank you very much.